For more on the NFL draft, we bring in former Buckeye linebacker Joshua Perry. Joshua, when I say with the 102nd pick in the NFL draft, the San Diego Chargers select Joshua Perry, what do you remember?
Well, it was a little bit of a hectic day for me. I probably didn't wake up until noon because I was disappointed. I thought I was going to go on the second day instead of the third, but I got up, and finally when I did, I got the call pretty early on the third day of the draft. And I can remember the emotions. I was very relieved to have been selected at that time that I was. And I was excited about an opportunity to get out of town to go play for an organization that I knew had some potential to do some things, which we're seeing right now from the Chargers. So it was a life-changing moment for me and very ecstatic, even as I remember that moment.
You know, Justin Fields didn't have to wait that long in comparison, but probably longer than he would have liked. So what do you think about Justin Fields to the Chicago Bears, a franchise that, I mean, Joshua, Rex Grossman, Jim Harbaugh, Jim McMahon, those are the good old days. Those are the best quarterbacks I can think of. So what do you think of the fit in Chicago?
Yeah, I mean, they're dying for their quarterback of the future, and that's the thing about that organization. If Justin Fields can get in there and he can play well, he's never going to have to pay for another meal in Chicago, and that's the exciting thing about it. But the question does remain, can he actually get in there and do well? It's an organization that we know where the GM has a very short leash. The head coach has had the questions asked about him. And so for Justin, it's going to be important to learn early, to develop early, and to be able to get into this system and have some success. This is the GM and the head coach that drafted him, but that's not to say that if they're fired and somebody else comes in, they wouldn't move on. We've seen teams move on from young quarterbacks early. I think Justin's a way better talent than somebody would want to give up on, but the fact of the matter is it's going to be on him to really put this organization on his shoulders, but I think he's the guy for the moment.
You know, the national media has been very critical of Justin Fields. The local media defends him like he's their firstborn son. Joshua, is the truth somewhere in the middle? What do you think about Fields' potential?
Yeah, I mean, it's a conundrum to me, right? I think about the same thing you did. The national media picked him apart, and honestly, I think that's because they couldn't pick the true QB1 apart in Trevor Lawrence. He was the guy that everybody knew was going to be the first pick, and there was really nothing to criticize him about. Justin Fields was a guy who played really well in 2019. For the majority of 2020, he played really well, but he had some moments that showed inconsistency. So he was going to be the quarterback that was going to be picked on. They were going to look at his mechanics and pick everything apart there. They were going to look at his play progression and try to pick all of that apart. They were going to try to look for character concerns, everything else. To be the number 11 pick in the NFL draft is a really good slot for him to be in. He has every single opportunity. But I think it was really because he was that guy that people viewed as the chaser for Trevor Lawrence is the reason he got so much criticism.
I want to ask you about some other Buckeyes. My favorite pick of the day today, Cleveland Browns taking Tommy Togiai. I love it because I think if he had come back to Ohio State one more year, he's probably a day one or day two draft pick next year. So I think it may have been bad for Togiai, but good for the Browns. Your thoughts on that fit?
Definitely. And Tommy Togiai is one of those guys where I definitely agree with you. A year left at Ohio State definitely would have helped him. But at the same time, I think a lot of the same concerns do exist about him. People are going to pick on his size because maybe he's not necessarily the biggest guy in there, although he is probably going to be the strongest guy in there. They're going to pick apart his ability to be elusive as an inside pass rusher. That's not something he's necessarily known for. But the fact of the matter is, he is a very, very good football player. He's strong. He works hard. He can plug up holes in the middle, and he can just knock guys off of the football. And for a team in the Cleveland Browns that really don't value the middle of their defense, although they've taken a couple of linebackers in their draft, it's important for them to have those big players up front that can really help the linebackers out. So I like the pick. I think it works for Tommy. I think it works for the Browns, and he'll have a fantastic career.
Pete Werner to the New Orleans Saints in round 2. If you would have told me before the year began, Pete Werner is going to be a second-round pick, that's surprising to me. But, hey, good for him. He's getting paid now. What do you think about Pete Werner as a second-rounder?
Well, and this is something that I've kind of hung on to from the end of the football season up until now. But I thought that Pete Werner was the most NFL-ready Buckeye out of the group that was selected over these last couple of days. And I just look at what he had done in terms of a body of work at Ohio State. And he showed that he's an all-encompassing linebacker, was able to defend the run, could blitz, but the thing that impressed me was how much Ohio State used him in coverage and how well he did. He wasn't one of those linebackers that's in coverage and you hear his name because he's getting a bomb thrown over his head, or he's getting a penalty down the field, or he's making a tackle after a big gain on him. He was a guy who could lock up whoever he had to cover, and that was going to be it. And so I see him transitioning into the NFL as a linebacker who can play early and as a guy who's going to be dependable that can have a long career. So after really breaking down the tape and watching it, it's no surprise to me, and I'm very happy for him.
The other second rounder, Josh Meyer, center to the Green Bay Packers. Time will tell if this makes Aaron Rodgers happy enough to have Josh Meyer snap him the ball. Your thoughts on Josh Myers to Green Bay?
Yeah, Green Bay gets rid of one Buckeye center and brings in another one. So we'll see. Aaron Rodgers like Corey Linsley a lot. I think he'll like Josh Myers if he ends up staying. But Josh Myers is a guy who I think really fits that mold of the Green Bay Packers. He's a lunch pail and hard hat kind of guy. He's going to give you some really good snaps. And he's extremely intelligent. And that's the quality, to me, that matters a ton for a center in the NFL. You have to be able to communicate with your quarterback. He has to trust that you'll be able to help him identify fronts, linebacker alignments, and even coverages at times from where the blitzes are coming from. So for him, again, getting in early, that's going to be key for a lot of these young Buckeyes that are going to the NFL, is to get in early. But I think he's going to be a great fit within that system.
Running back Trey Sermon to the 49ers. I guess the good news is Kyle Shanahan knows how to run the football. The bad news is it's a bit of a crowded backfield. Do you think Trey Sermon can emerge?
I do. And the question with Trey Sermon from a lot of teams was, can he catch the ball effectively out of the backfield? And I was at Ohio State's pro day, and Trey Sermon ran a lot of routes. He caught the ball very naturally. He looked good in his route running. And I think that's going to benefit him going to the 49ers because of the type of offense they like to run. They're going to run the ball for sure, but they like to get that running back incorporated into some of the pass schemes and the concepts that they do offensively. And so him showing that he can be that type of guy who you can put him in on first, second, or third down, and he can be successful is really important. So I really like the pick. I think it's a great opportunity for him. To me, he was one of the biggest sleepers for Ohio State heading into this draft.
Last night ended with Baron Browning to the Broncos. I'm sure Baron Browning probably wanted a bigger paycheck than he's going to get. But that second contract, can he earn his way into a big paycheck?
Yeah, and I talked to Baron Browning actually about it, and he's super excited for the opportunity. And I think he understood where he was going to go in this draft because over his Ohio State career, he was pretty inconsistent. I mean, we're going to be completely honest about what he did. He emerged toward the end of his career, but the body of work is still lacking. He's a guy 100% that's going to have a better NFL career than he did a college career. And you're right, that money is sitting out there for him, and he's the type of guy who can get it. He can play off the ball. He's very aggressive, very quick, so he can play on the ball and set the edge and get after the passer. Those are the linebackers in the NFL today that can add value. I see him as one of those guys.
It took Urban Meyer 3 days to remember that he wasn't the former head coach of Clemson. All right, so he takes a Buckeye. He takes Luke Farrell there at tight end. What do you think about Urban taking one of his guys?
I'm not surprised that Urban actually went and took a Buckeye because it's something that he knows. It's a safe pick for him. He's got great communication with the current staff at Ohio State, had coached a lot of the guys that were in the draft anyway, so he'd have the opportunity to really understand which of these guys he would want to take and what makes them tick. Luke Farrell is a guy who can get in there and play right away, in my opinion, and that's how it is with a number of tight ends. But it's a position where if you can show that you can play on special teams and you can show you understand the playbook, there's a role for everybody because NFL teams like to roll those guys through. I also think Urban Meyer's offense, at least in year one, is going to rely heavily on those running backs and those tight ends because he has a young quarterback he's trying to develop. So this is going to be a very important opportunity for him.
Over the last 3 years, Shaun Wade's draft stock, it's been like Bitcoin. I mean, it is up, down. He settles on day 3 with the Ravens. What do you make of that?
Yeah, it's a little bit of a shame because of what we saw out of him in 2019. He comes back in 2020, and to be completely honest, from talking to his agent and some other people familiar with the situation, he was never really healthy this year. And it was a very disjointed year. He didn't have the ability to rehab after some surgeries and different things that can set a player back, and it showed on the field. Absolutely inconsistent. He had some really dull moments, but he also had some very high highlights. And so from a value standpoint, if you're a coaching staff that feels like you can get the 2019 production out of Shaun Wade, then you hit a home run with the pick. And so it's going to be upon him to get in there, to grind, to show that he is the player that he put on tape in years past, not necessarily last year. But for me, I think he'll have a fine NFL career because he'll be healthy and he'll have that mindset of grinding to prove everybody wrong.
Okay, let's talk Bengals and Browns before you go. Cincinnati goes Jamar Chase. They wait to take linemen later in the draft. Are you okay with that call?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I think I'm going to be okay with it. For me personally, I would go lineman first and then find a wide receiver in the second round, because the wide receiver crop from this year was so deep. And I think that linemen really fall off after the first round. I think there is a drastic drop in talent there. But when you talk about a reunion of Chase and Burrow, it makes a lot of sense. When you talk about the type of offense they like to run from 11 personnel, where they like to get those wide receivers out on the field, get you a game changer, and then just let Joe Burrow create, because we know he can do that on his own. Let him kind of get the ball out of his hands and get it to the weapons that exist in that offense. So I'm totally fine with it. And heading into the draft, head coach of the Bengals said that he felt okay with where his offensive line was. I trust him. I believe him, because he doesn't want to get his quarterback hurt again. So it's not a bad pick at all for me.
Yeah, the Browns add some good defensive picks. They go Newsome in round 1 from Northwestern. They get Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah from Notre Dame. He slid. Your thoughts on what Cleveland did this year?
Yeah, I thought it was really smart. Going with Newsome in the first round is a great pick. He's a smart guy, obviously played at Northwestern, but he's a really edgy guy who I think is a physical corner who's going to add some depth there to a room that's been banged up and injured. And then when you look at our guy from Notre Dame, and I don't want to chop up his name, so I'm not going to try to say it right now. He's the type of player that I think the Cleveland Browns would really like, because they're a team who like to put a bunch of DBs on the field. And when you have a linebacker who's versatile, who can run a little bit, but you also know he's going to be stout in stopping the run, it creates a great situation. So I think it's really smart drafting there.